Hello. What I'm going to talk about is two different types of creation. We're all familiar with the one, which would be what God has created, and only God can create. The other one is modification. Most people haven't heard about that one. We are really familiar with the other one, is the distraction from modification is evolution. I feel that they use evolution as a distraction so you don't look at modification. And that's why there's so much things that's easy to disprove evolution. And so what happens is, let me use a coin. If you look on a coin, you have heads and tails. You also have the edge, but that's for another topic. To make a coin, you have to have both sides. I think you have the same thing on the creation. Subconsciously, we realize there's two sides. What we have a hard time with is, what's the other side if it's easily to be disproved, challenged, it's only a theory, and it's easy to put holes in the theory. It makes it really hard to, okay, then what's the other one? And that's where modification is. By just saying modification, that, oh, okay, it makes it a lot easier to understand. Only God can create. However, we do have a means to modify what God created. And after God created, the first thing He did after He created us in Genesis, in 1 and also in 2, He blessed us. That was the first thing. So we all have a blessing. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But let's go back on this modification. What is modification? I think it came in, if you review the first chapter of chapter 6 in Genesis 1 down a little ways, you'll see something came in and modified what God created. And I think what you have at that point, what was modified, what we would be familiar with would be the David and the Goliath, the giants. Something modified what God created, and I think that would be the giants. We also, if you look at the words, they're also very interesting. Mankind. What does mankind mean? It might mean kind of a man. I never thought about it like that, but that could be the case in the meaning of mankind. It's kind of a man because mankind was modified from man, and man would be referred to as human. We're called human beings. Some are called mankind, kind of a man, from a human being. With all that being said, we can go on and talk about modification. You look at, and right now they're modifying the foods, soybean, wheat. They're even talking about modifying salmon, genetically modified. Cloning, isn't that a modification? You have to have something real to clone. What is that? So this has been around for a long, long time. I don't think the reason why they talk much about modification is eventually you have to go back, who is the modifier? And at that point, now you have the good and evil. God, who created everything. Satan modified what God created. So now you're coming back to that duality again, the heads and the tails. Because in Genesis 1:28 it talks about, as soon as we were created, we were blessed. And that is, we all have a blessing, but that is for the reason for a lot of people want control. Because if they can have control over you, then they can receive your blessing and have it transferred to them. So what happens is a lot of times the modifier and what's been modified tries to take control of what God has created. And I never thought about it in that category, but that's really kind of what's going on. If you look in the politics and everywhere else, it is for control. And it's to receive the blessing that was given, what God has created. Because there's not a blessing on the modification. So for them to receive a blessing, it has to be taken from what God has created to be transferred to them. And that way you start to understand why there's other people want control over other people or nations, and on and on and on it goes. So But this all comes back to a spiritual point. And that was, if you can modify what God created, you can pollute the bloodline and prevent God's Son from coming to redeem what he has created, to bring it and restore it through Jesus.